You know, we throw the word know around all the time. I know my own name, you know what you ate this morning. It seems so simple, doesn't it? But believe it or not, for centuries, philosophers have been totally stumped by a ridiculously tricky question. What does it actually mean to know something? So let's dive in and see if we can piece this puzzle together.
Take a simple fact. You know that Paris is the capital of France. That feels solid, right? It's just a piece of knowledge you have. But what is it really that makes that knowledge and not just, a lucky guess? That's the core puzzle we're going to try and unpack here.
Okay, so before we can even start building a definition, we need to get clear on what kind of knowledge we're even talking about. Turns out there are different flavors of knowing, and the difference is super important.
So on one side, you've got ability knowledge. This is know-how. You know how to swim, you know how to ride a bike. Lots of creatures have this. But what philosophers get really fascinated by is propositional knowledge. That's knowing that something is true, knowing that the earth is round. That's the stuff that requires some serious thinking.
So just so we're all on the same page, from here on out, whenever we say knowledge, we're talking about that second kind, propositional knowledge, the knowing that stuff. Got it? Cool.
All right, with that settled, let's start building our definition from the ground up. Pretty much everyone agrees that to know something, you need at least two key ingredients.
First, you have to actually believe it. It sounds obvious, but you can't know something you don't believe. And second, the thing you believe has to actually be true. You can believe with all your heart that the moon is made of green cheese, but you can't know it because, well, it's not. So belief and truth, these are our first two building blocks. But is that the whole story?
So does that mean we're done? Is knowledge just a belief that happens to be true? It sounds pretty good on the surface, but let's kick the tires a little with a quick thought experiment.
Let's meet Harry. Harry's at the racetrack, and he puts all his money on a horse called Lucky Lass. Now why? Does he have an inside tip? Did he study her past performance? Nope. He just thinks the name sounds lucky. That's it. He forms the belief Lucky Lass is gonna win.
And what do you know? Lucky Lass wins by a nose. So let's look at the facts. Harry had a belief, and that belief turned out to be true. But did he know she would win? Our gut feeling, right, is a loud no. He just got lucky. It was a total fluke.
This whole problem of luck shows us that we're missing a critical piece of the puzzle. To fix this, philosophers way back to Plato proposed a third ingredient was needed.
And that brings us to the classic heavyweight champion definition of knowledge, justified true belief, or JTB for short. The big idea here is that knowledge isn't just a true belief. It's a true belief that you have good reasons for, that you can justify. This totally solves the Harry problem. He had zero justification, so he didn't have knowledge.
And this three-part recipe, belief, truth, and justification, was a philosophical rock star. It was elegant, it made sense, and it seemed to solve the problem of luck perfectly. It dominated the field for over 2,000 years. It seemed bulletproof. Until it wasn't.
For 2 millennia, JTB was the bedrock. It was what everyone was taught. It seemed totally unshakable. And then, in 1963, the whole thing came crashing down because of something we now call the Gettier problem.
So in 1963, a philosopher named Edmund Gettier, who wasn't particularly famous at the time, published this little paper that basically threw a grenade into the heart of epistemology. And get this, the paper that dismantled a 2,000-year-old theory was just 2.5 pages long. That's it. It was an absolute bombshell, an intellectual earthquake packed into just a few paragraphs.
So how did he do it? With these brilliantly simple little stories. Let's walk through one of the most famous examples. Imagine a guy named John. He walks downstairs one morning, glances at the old grandfather clock in the hall, and sees it reads 8:20. So naturally, he forms a belief, the time is 8:20. So let's run our JTB checklist. Does he believe it's 8:20? Yep. Is he justified? You bet. That clock has been working perfectly for years. And just by a wild coincidence, is it actually 8:20 a.m.? Yes, it is. So bingo, John has a justified true belief. According to the classic definition, he should have knowledge.
But here's the twist. Here's the kicker. What John doesn't know is that the clock is broken. It actually stopped working exactly 24 hours ago, at 8:20 the previous morning.
So think about that for a second. John has a belief. It's true, and it's justified. It checks all the boxes for JTB. But does he actually know what time it is? No way! He just got incredibly lucky. He formed a true belief by looking at a broken clock. This is a Gettier case, a perfect example of justified true belief that intuitively isn't knowledge at all. So as you can imagine, Gettier's paper sent philosophers scrambling. The hunt was on to find a new, Gettier-proof definition of knowledge. And the first instinct for many was just to try and patch the old theory.
One of the first ideas was to add a fourth condition. Something like, okay, knowledge is justified true belief as long as your justification isn't based on a false belief. In John's case, his justification relied on the false belief that the clock was working. So this patch seems to fix it. Problem solved, right?
Well, not so fast. Here's the dilemma. The patch works great for John's broken clock. But now, think about his sister Sally. She looks at her perfectly working clock and forms a justified true belief about the time. We'd all agree she has knowledge. But what if she also has some minor false belief, like she thinks the clock is brand new when it's actually 5 years old? If we make the no false beliefs rule too strict, we might accidentally disqualify Sally's genuine knowledge too. The patch is either too weak or way too strong.
And what all of this really gets at is something profound. The Gettier problem shows us that for something to be knowledge, the connection between our justified belief in our heads and the truth out in the world can't just be an accident. It has to be connected in the right kind of way. It can't be a fluke.
So, after a 2,000-year-old definition was torn down, we're left with this huge, open question that philosophers are still wrestling with today. And it's not just a game. Understanding the line between a lucky guess and real knowledge is fundamental to, well, everything. So, I'll leave you with the big question. If knowledge isn't justified true belief, then what is it?